So on this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by my friend Karmen Tang, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of Alchemy Pay, a model, a wellness enthusiast, and generally a great reminder to me about the empowering benefits of self-improvement. Today, we'll be discussing the idea of taking agency of your life. We'll be looking at how this concept manifests through all the features of one's life and discuss how this idea has actually shown up repeatedly in Karmen's personal and professional life. I'm delighted to have you here, all the way from Singapore. I'm excited to catch up.
Thanks for having
No
me.
problem. Welcome to Loose Change Season 2.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
No, thank you for joining us. So I think today's episode, we've spoken about stuff like this in the past, and it's quite an important theme, just in like modern contemporary society where so many people feel like they're just not in control of their lives. You wake up, you go to work, and straight away from the moment you wake up, like the time, you don't own your own time anymore. And in so many other facets as well of life, you don't feel like you have control or agency of your own life. And really like one of the most empowering things that anyone tends to do in many different features of their life is to take agency back into their lives. And that's something that I wanted to explore with you today. But what do you think taking agency of your life looks like or means for you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think now more than ever, people feel like from a macro perspective, there's a lot of things changing in the world and a lot of negative news. You can just turn on the news and hear, there's a war, there's inflation, there's rising cost of living and everything. And I think for me personally, taking agency is basically taking responsibility for your own life. And for me, it really started from like relearning all the things that I grew up doing, and I think society really has like a vested interest for us to live a very homogenous life and to live for people to take more of a mainstream route and to do what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
And so I think taking agency is very much trying to unlearn what the things that you thought were right or things that you thought were truth. And it's hard because, it's almost just like trying to start a habit. It's going to take time and effort. And so using that kind of, I think the internet has had the internet has allowed the value of information to be democratized.
Democratized.
And so people are able to research and find out, truth or not truth, they're able to research more about any specific topic out there. And so they can actually understand, just dig deeper and not take things for granted and take things for, it's always done this way, or this is what my parents told me, or what my friends do, and I'm just always going to do this. So the internet has been really powerful in that aspect, along with social media, which has allowed a lot of thought leaders within their own, specific spaces or industries to really start talking about how better we can do something. And it's just about applying that mindset and that, in all areas of life, whether that's health, finances, career and business, many different areas. There's so many different ways to do things. And I think taking agency is taking the responsibility to do your research. And that can literally be applied to anything in life.
Yeah, it's so true because from when we're young and we go to school and we're studying, we're sort of like a route is carved out for us, which allegedly leads to success, right?
Yeah.
And we're sort of like shown this route by mentors, parents, and like people who are responsible for us, who are like taught about this route, which then is imposed on us. And I say that's sort of like traditional education, where it leads to you go to good school, you go to good unis, and then you're fine.
Yeah.
But quite often, because that's the path of least resistance. It's the one that most people take by its very nature. And I don't use this word with stigma attached to it. It leads to mediocrity.
Yeah.
And I'm not stigmatizing the word mediocrity. What I mean by that is it's where most people end up because they're shown that, right, this is the way that you should do things. These are the paths that you should take. And you're constantly having decisions made for you. You go to these schools, you get these jobs that you might not love, and most of your time is being given up to them, and then you're told to buy a home using a mortgage or other means or however possible, and then you're suddenly tied in and more decisions are taken away from you. It seems like at each stage of life, success is characterized by losing more and more control over your own decisions and time. And what you'll find, people who sort of like break out of that system, whether it's in their education, in their careers, like by starting businesses, but also like you said, in the foods that they're eating, like what they're doing with their time, like whether they're looking after their bodies, that is going against the norm and gaining sort of control back in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think when it boils down to success, a lot of it is very much manipulated by the media. And we see, you know, back in, you know, our parents' generations, like success was around fame and money, and it still is to some extent, but people are slowly starting to see that success is very much doing what you want to do. And that's very unique and individual. That's different for every single person. And so, you know, as you're young, of course, you don't necessarily have the confidence or the tools to be able to make your own decisions from a young age. Some do, but often you're kind of listening to what your parents or your friends tell you to do. And so I think as you grow older, you either end up being on autopilot and just doing what is like the easy path in front of you, or you can take, you know, the big change and take that kind of disruptive path to think, what is it I actually want to do? But that obviously comes with a lot of change, which means effort and time, potential time wasted, and, you know, a lot of failures as well. And people do still kind of associate failures with as a bad thing, but actually I think failure is like essential for success, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Otherwise, if you don't fail, then you're never going to grow or get, you know, in another further place in life.
100%. And I think part of another thing is that success, or like the definitions of success, sometimes you realize for people that achieve like material success that we've defined by society, isn't actually our own personal definitions of success. Like going back to the concept of like, go to a good school, get good academics, get this job, and then buy this house. And once you achieve those things, if you're lucky enough to achieve those things, a lot of people are like, I'm not that happy.
This is it.
This isn't my idea of success. And I've definitely experienced that at different stages of life. And the empowering thing, and to sort of like tie this back to like taking agency, is always when you achieve something that you sort of like defined as your own personal marker of success, or something that you tried against the grain for yourself, and achieving that thing it's way more empowering. I've found anyway in my personal journey. But I think you have one of the most interesting like personal journeys, careers, like stories. Could you tell us a bit more about like your sort of like professional personal journey?
Yeah, I do have I guess it's been very fun and interesting. I started off in a very conventional career. I did economics at university, graduated, and then joined Magee, which is a professional services company firm, and was qualifying to be a chartered accountant. So I stayed with them for 3 years, was doing audit, which was not for me. But I really, honestly, hated my life. I was like, what am I doing? Is this
That was in London, right?
That was in London, yes. And I, after those 15 exams, you know, obviously qualified, I was like, okay, I don't want to stay in audit. What else could I do? So I spent some time in management consulting. And usually with management consulting, you get put out on these kind of long stints with clients abroad. And so I ended up being at Clydesdale Bank in Glasgow. And so I remember having to commute from London to Glasgow like every week. So waking up at like 4 a.m. in the mornings just to get a plane from London to Glasgow every week. And I was like, oh my gosh.
How long were you on that project?
I think for about 2-3 months. And it was like winter too. So I don't think I saw like a ray of sunshine.
Oh my God.
Obviously it was like contemplating life and thinking, you know, what am I doing? And I think that was, you know, during that role, I had a bit of a transition and I decided to quit, and I ended up going backpacking around South America on my own, as you do. And that was kind of like the start of me kind of, I guess, taking agency in a way. Like obviously it was a huge risk to go on my own.
By conventional standards, as a qualified accountant, then management consultant in the city, in one of the most sort of like economically prosperous cities in the world, you'd attain success for that stage of your life. You weren't happy.
Yes. Well, your salary basically doubles after you qualify. And I remember thinking like, is this it? I'm just going to continue working, you know, for the next 20, 30 years of my life.
And for who? For other people to be like, oh my God, you're doing so well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then you decided, I guess, the first manifest way of taking agency was like, I'm actually going to prioritize like my own happiness here and step away from this and then fly to South America.
Well, I had a bit of an inflection point in my personal life as well. I really wasn't happy with work and career, but personally, like, my parents had just split up. I think I remember I found out that my boyfriend was cheating on me at the time. And like living in London, it's fine, honestly. But I honestly think it was like the best breakup because it just propelled me across the different, I'm really thankful for it because, but when I, rewind back and look at the kind of life that I was living, and I was just going out every night in London. I mean, London's got a great music scene and it's great to go out, but it's not something you should be doing like every weekend. And that was like, I saw nights out and like music as like a form of escapism. And, it just wasn't healthy. And it was kind of skewing more towards that side. And it was almost just like trying to survive. And so, I decided to take some time out and went traveling around South America on my own. I think traveling is an amazing tool to be able to, meet new people and also see new cultures and see how life is done differently outside of your own, peripheral of life. So that was it was really awakening, actually. I had like a very spiritual moment, and when after traveling, I knew that I needed to leave Azad. So coming back, it's funny because obviously when you qualify, your salary doubles. So I didn't quite have the courage to fully give up everything and just move into, say, like a creative role, of which I wouldn't even know what I would have been doing. Yeah. So I ended up joining a global creative agency, and I joined as the FC there. So still in finance, using my qualification, but within a very creative environment. And that was like an incredible experience. I was 25 at the time, so still relatively young. And I was basically managing, I was working with a couple of MDs like to manage the agency from like people, profit, and product. And it gave me really great insight into, the business side of things and how to, drive the business forward. And I was like basically sitting in boardroom meetings with like, all men, and I was like the only girl, but it really did. I mean, of course, there was like imposter syndrome, and in those moments, you just think that, like I don't know enough. Like, why am I here? But I was the only one who was a qualified accountant, which is why I was in that role. But it really did. It was a steep learning curve, and I learned so much about the business side of things because it was very much forward thinking. And about a year on, my COO called me one day from the New York office, and he was like, Karmen, what do you think of Singapore? And never been before. I was like, why? And he was like, well, we basically need you to cover someone on maternity leave for 6 months. Can you go over there? It's like, when do you need me to go? And he was like next month.
Oh my God.
So pretty much like packed my stuff to go with the intention of going there for 6 months. Ended up obviously being there for longer. And it was, when you move to a new country, I didn't know anyone. Obviously had friends from work, but I hadn't met anyone. I didn't have like a community that I could kind of slot myself into. And so I used a lot of my spare time to travel and also just educate myself on a lot of aspects around personal development and entrepreneurship. So I remember like really being into, I think like after a while being in that role, I just felt a bit complacent and I wanted to explore other things. And I remember going on a trip to Sri Lanka actually, and just being really inspired by a lot of the startups there. There was like a really cool surf camp that had like accommodation, and just like their marketing and branding was just like really on point. And I thought, these guys have literally just quit their jobs, just moved to Sri Lanka and set up a business. Like it's just, and when you're stuck in London in like a very corporate job, you're not really exposed to these kind of lifestyle
you've got
businesses.
the blinkers on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's very different now coming to London because I see a lot of cool startups, but back then I feel like it can be very easy to be in your own bubble and not see what else is going on outside of the corporate life.
Yeah. I can relate to a lot of that. And London is just a bit of a relentless city, I think, and like loads of my friends describe it as well. It's the best place in the world at times, and I sort of stand by that. we've grown up in the chaos, so like we're very aware of it. But it can be a very relentless place, and it can sometimes, if you're not in control, be quite destructive to you, like and your personal, mental, professional health.
Absolutely.
And it's so funny because I'm at the stage of where like some of my friends are at an impasse, and actually some people have just moved to Singapore. So
really?
it's so funny. It's like the perfect escape from London. I've got some friends who just moved to Singapore. But I actually spoke to on another interview that we've done with a friend and ex-YouTuber called Jamie Rawsthorne, and we spoke privately, and I think in the episode about just like wanting a break from London. And he actually went to Mexico, and he's in South America now doing
nice.
He's doing incredible stuff. And it was just like sometimes getting away from the environment that you're in allows you to start again and refocus.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
not easy, but it does give you an opportunity to restart and refocus.
Yeah, and just back to the point you mentioned earlier on about how, like growing up, not even growing up, but everyone so quickly gets pulled in different directions, and different people in your life want different things from you. And so you can very quickly become a slave to people's other needs and demands.
Yeah.
And so you don't even have control of your own time. And that's why I love Tim Ferriss's kind of methodology, and he's always like, with emails, you should always batch emails, and he's really big on time efficiency and how you should manage your own time. And so like little things like I don't even have notifications on my phone anymore, and obviously for emergencies people just call me, right? But I try not to have notifications because you just get there's so much distraction, right?
So much. That's how much you're going to try that, because
exactly.
Mine is, when did WhatsApp become another inbox? Like, if anyone's watching, and I feel awful because my friends know I love them, but there will be times where I'm just looking at it like I don't have the capacity to reply to this in a way that will give you the grace that it deserves. Yeah. So I'm just like unread, flicking through it like, this is another inbox.
Wait till you get into crypto. It's like Telegram, WeChat. There's like so many other platforms.
So at the moment, I've actually got
a nightmare.
Yeah, it's so I've got a chat going on Telegram, and the idea behind that was to separate it from the rest of my chats on WhatsApp. And then I've got like one on Instagram, and then one on like Facebook. And,
Instagram DMs.
And it's I think I need to set better boundaries with myself with like notifications. So that's definitely something.
Yeah, it's a whole nother topic which sure we can dive into, but I think you made a good point there. When I moved to Singapore, I was like, wow, I just actually have so much more time because I didn't have any social obligations. I also a lot of it was just social obligations and feeling the need to go out all the time. And also Singapore is much smaller, so the amount of time I think I spend traveling in London, it's just I don't know how you guys do it anymore, but the traveling is insane here.
Well, I don't live far from here, and I was late getting here because of the TFL. But we do, and like getting from one side of London to the other can take you longer than getting to other cities.
Exactly.
Insane.
I think I could be in Bali by now from Singapore. So actually, before I moved to Singapore, I had the idea to start a podcast as well.
Yes.
This is back in 2018. And I wanted to shine light on a lot of entrepreneurs and founders and talk about their stories on how they got started, because I was just interested, and I thought, how does anyone come about entrepreneurship and how do they go around starting a business? But I guess my kind of edge was very much focusing more from the personal struggles and trying to get a bit more deeper into their personal stories. Back then it was a bit more less common. I think now everyone's got a podcast about entrepreneurship, but back then...
welcome.
Yours is slightly different. Back then I was interviewing a ton of entrepreneurs before I actually flew out to Singapore. Definitely not as high production as you. I literally had my phone and was like speaking to the phone.
That's actually how we met.
What, through?
Through my
podcast, because I reached out to you guys, and the production was definitely not as high quality as it is today.
Great. I really enjoyed
it. It was like a great learning curve and a great platform for me, and slowly, given my experience in business and finance, I started coaching and consulting other startups. Because a lot of them have a great idea, and most of them were like creatives, and they had a great idea, but they didn't quite know how to, work on a business model or conceptualize it, or even think about like funding and all of that stuff. So I started kind of like working with clients on the side during my day job, and as time went on, I kind of fell in love with branding and marketing. And so, slowly over time, I ended up making that transition. and then started my own consultancy, which is called Another Startup Story, and which you were a guest on the podcast. And then, like today I head up marketing for a crypto payment platform. So kind of like the other way around. So in a more creative role, but now in the finance industry. So it's kind of, swapped around. Whereas before I was always working at agencies in a creative, company, but in a finance role. So
absolutely.
Kind of turn. So
that's such an interesting journey. And we'll definitely touch on the crypto journey, because I remember when you were just about to start and we were speaking about diving into like the world of crypto, and it was so new to you, fairly, I guess. And now you're very much in the weeds of it. But before that, like I love how you sort of described the process of which you were given the opportunities to take agency in your life in different ways. But one of the big ways I think people can take ownership of their own lives, from my own experience, and I've like very comfortable and open like about speaking about it before in my own journey, is health and wellness, fitness, nutrition, whatever you want to like tranche all of that under, which is such an important feature of our lives. And actually, in somewhere like London, it's quite easy to ignore because you're so busy thinking about work, thinking about I need to do this, I need to get this done. So my own journey started, the rebalancing was a couple of years ago when I lost my mum. And that whole experience, obviously, it was like a forced reset. It was like, right,
like
your
a
life
bit of a
is
wake-up call.
Yeah, completely. And I had the same spiritual turning as well, and everything that like that experience was like, right, your life is now completely back to basics. You can really consider what matters. The small like anxieties, worries, the pressures is all just, it's noise. It doesn't even matter. It completely falls away. And because you're now putting into comparison the things that actually matter in your life, because you actually faced some real trauma. And in that process, the first step I took was actually like, okay, I'm at my lowest point. How do I get myself out of here? And in any state I've ever been in, it's been like, okay, the best I felt is always when I'm like my healthiest and my fittest, or like when I'm eating well, when I'm moving more. So I remember I made a decision to like, for the first time, I called up a coach, a fitness coach, who Shaq actually uses as well. And he's a friend of mine.
I've seen your transformation. It's amazing.
So I actually called him saying, I had a call with him. I was like, oh, hey mate, like, I'm calling you actually because this isn't like a vanity thing for me. And I told him like, this was actually maybe like 6 weeks after I lost my mum. I was like, hey bro, like this isn't a vanity thing for me. I just know that my mental health has a direct relationship with my physical health. And I'm probably, I think I was 27 at the time. 27? I think I was 27 at the time. And I was like, I'm probably way past my peak. And And he was just like sitting there laughing. He was like, you have no idea. You're gonna be really happy with like how this all turns out. He was like, men don't hit their physical peak until about 31 to 33.
I think men peak in their 40s. Just saying,
Good.
Women in their 30s. So
I'll take that.
I keep saying that to our friends. They're like,
I've got a while to go.
Like, no. I think men get that peak in their 40s.
But generally, I think like men in their 20s if they've not looked after their health for a while, and this was like after the pandemic as well, where we hadn't really been, well, I hadn't, obviously we had that period where we stayed in, we were running and stuff, but there wasn't really a focus on health. So it was like, I just want to like feel good again. I don't care about like looking any kind of way. And he was like, that's a really great like reason to like get your health back in order. And it really changed my life, like genuinely. I know it sounds crazy, but just like, I was like, okay, I'm going to focus now. The first thing I'm going to do to get myself back in order is like, I'm going to focus on my fitness and my health. And it was like a 12-week program. We ended up carrying on for like over a year, just because I love the accountability, the focus on fitness and health. And I did have a crazy transformation as well physically, but that was collateral. And the first thing was like, I was like, wow, I'm taking back control of my own health and feeling good about it. And that was so empowering. And like suddenly I was like conscious of like the way I wanted to eat, not because of any other reason than I wanted to eat well, because I was suddenly focusing on my health. And it was really empowering to have that like, it was like a self-burning motivation wheel when it came to like my fitness and my health. And And I remember when I managed to do that, slowly other things started to fall into place a lot easier as well.
Yeah.
It's a weird phenomenon, like when you have something which goes into good flow, it's almost easier to get everything into... It's easier to be disciplined with everything when you start to be disciplined with one thing. It was my experience, and I know other people have said the same thing.
Absolutely.
And an easy, low barrier way to start that will instantly make you feel better about yourself, and you can see progress in yourself.
Like it's just the gift that keeps on giving.
Exactly, it's like the purest meritocracy, is to start thinking about your own health again. So I think that's like one of the big ways that I've seen it manifest in my life, with like exponential positive impact, is to, I took agency back by thinking, okay, right, I'm at the bottom now, what do I do? I'm going to focus on my health again. But I remember when we were speaking around that time, you had quite a bit of an awareness of like the wellness space as well, and you had your own journey with like wellness and health. Was that after you moved to Singapore? Or?
I think I've always been into wellness, like growing up. So like you, but I would always like cut snippets out of magazines of like tips and stuff, like wellness, like beauty tips and stuff. And I've always been very active. I used to dance a lot. So I've always been into wellness before it even was, coined the term wellness. Obviously wellness is like $1 trillion industry now, and it covers so many different aspects under the wellness umbrella. But I think for me, kind of rewinding back to say, you said you had a spiritual kind of awakening. I had the same, and also, trying to take more agency in terms of business world and not just like being in a 9-to-5 job and kind of going through it with my eyes blind shut and kind of taking more agency. The only other aspect was the physical aspect that was missing. And so even though I was always very active, that's when I started to take more, I guess, like agency in, the foods I put in my body, like what I put on my body, the products that I use, how I train my body. Because like you said, exercise and moving your body gives exponential growth in all other areas of your life. I don't know if you read much about mental models, but mental models is kind of like different. A lot of startup founders use models to try and learn specific aspects in their company, or even just mindset. And there's a mental model for increasing health, and basically it's based on 4 or 5 different prerequisites. And the first one is relationships. The second one is sleep. Third one is career, exercise actually. Fourth is career and kind of work, and then the final one is nutrition. So that's like relationship, sleep, exercise, career, and nutrition. So like basically 3 of them out of the 5 are relating to wellness. And what it's saying is no matter how much sleep you get, if your relationship's the shit, then you're gonna your health is gonna be compromised. And so it's quite interesting to take that kind of mental model for increasing health, and you'll see that, all 3 of them are very much relating to wellness and have such a huge impact on other areas. And so for me, I love reading about like nutrition, and it's crazy to think, I don't know, I love talking about this, and I think
I love it.
Like growing up, like even looking at like the foods that we're giving as children, and the products that we're using, like on our toothpaste, our body shower gel, there's so much, SLS and like so many toxins, which are even like sunscreen, for example. Pretty much all, I can guarantee you 90% of sunscreens on the shelves have cancer-inducing ingredients, pretty much. And it's just like, how is this not regulated, and why is this not, information made widely? It's just because it's all about, it's profits and these pharmaceutical 100%. Companies.
I actually learned a lot about that when my mum became unwell, because she was really young, so she was in her 40s.
Right.
So,
wow. Yeah.
So and it was like a really quick, like aggressive cancer. She was very healthy. Like, my mum was like teetotal all of her life, yoga every day, and it was just like we couldn't.
So sudden.
And she got developed ovarian cancer, which is one of the more aggressive forms. But in that process, we were like, how can this happen to such a young, healthy woman? Because normally it's women in like much older that it happens to. And she actually did loads of research into like I call it wellness. I'm just going to give it that term. So I read a book called How Not to Die and Chris Beats Cancer. And that was actually talking about how the modern foods available and like everything about like our current conditions are completely toxic to our body.
Yeah.
And the guy that actually wrote How Not to Die, he is a doctor. He's a Harvard graduate.
Right.
So he studied medicine at Harvard Med, and he had a personal experience with his grandmother who was sent home to die, basically. And she was like, oh, she's not going to make it. She's too ill. And then they took her to like this special doctor that was talking about utilizing nutrition as part of your recovery. So he was like a teenager.
Yeah.
So they took them to this kooky, wacky doctor. And
like a more holistic
kind
of.
Yeah. And she was like wheelchaired in to this, we'll call it a hospital.
Right.
I think it was a hospital. I don't want to say, or clinic. And told that she had 2 weeks left to live. And she walked out after spending 2 weeks there, or like 2 or 3 weeks there. She walked out, and she couldn't walk for the last like few months. She was expected to die, because he was like, okay, we're going to focus in on like the foods that you take in. Yeah. We're going to start getting you moving a little bit. And he was like, that completely set him on this journey of like, what is this about modern medicine, and why are we getting it so wrong? Yeah. So his name's Dr. Michael Greger, and he talks about like how foods. So modern medicine is really great at dealing with trauma. If you were to have an accident and you needed a surgery, it could save your life.
Yeah. But
your day-to-day living and like looking after your body every day and like working on like the preventative side, is like your medicine is what you're ingesting, is the foods that you're taking in, is like the actions that you're taking like around you. And it's just not profitable to consider health in that way, because medicine, obviously, pharmaceuticals, they benefit from there being a problem and solving the problem, rather than a system where you prevent the problem.
They're just literally creating a problem so they can make profit.
and what I learned actually in that whole experience with mum was that the chemotherapy that was being administered to my mum was the same chemotherapy drugs that had been around since the 1960s.
Oh, wow.
So I think one of the most commonly used drugs for chemo is something called paclitaxel, which hasn't changed since the 60s. Wow. And the way they discovered it was that it was basically like a mustard seed experiment, which was going to be used as like poisonous gas.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And then they realized that it had an impact on reducing tumors, obviously because it's killing everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the same drugs they administer today. Anyone can check. If anyone has family members, I'm sure that they know. And that makes you realize that we have a reliance on experts, society, everything. And we just assume that that's the right answer.
Yeah.
But part of like you said earlier, taking agency is learning yourself and doing the research yourself and realizing that there are other alternatives to the simple solutions that we're given now. And taking agency could actually in some cases mean like prolonging or extending or saving your own life.
Yeah. No, I agree with the preventative versus curing aspect. I think, simple example, like last year when I came back to the UK, I got this awful cough for like 2-3 weeks, just would not go away, to the point where my ribs were like in so much pain and I was like coughing up blood, to the point where I was like, okay, I really need to see a doctor now, because I hate going to the doctor, because I just think unless I'm like dying, I just don't want to be on antibiotics. And of course, she prescribed me antibiotics. I just didn't go and collect it because I was like, I'm sure this will like ride out, this will go away naturally. And I don't think it's worth disrupting my microbiome. Because basically what antibiotics does is it wipes away all the bad bacteria, but also the good one. And so you're kind of really susceptible to other potential illnesses as well. Maybe your cough might go away, but then your and that didn't even guarantee for the cough to go away. It was just kind of just like make sure that there wouldn't be any kind of infections, throat infections. But yeah, very much taking a more holistic approach. And for anyone who is new to this, like looking into TCM, like traditional Chinese medicine approaches, and trying to live a more healthier lifestyle to make sure that you're not going to face these, crazy. Obviously, sometimes, a lot of it, there's so many other factors involved, just genetics. But when you really break it down, and it was during COVID actually when I had so much time to like just declutter and sort out my stuff in my home. And I was like going through all my toiletries. I was like, what is on the back? Like trying to actually really understand like what each ingredient is. And it was actually, I was working with a startup called Sequential Skin. And what they do is they do skin test patching. And you will have like a sticker to pass test your skin, and you send it off to the lab, and they will send you back a report which tells you kind of like how old they think you are based on your skin.
Really?
And then they obviously advise the ingredients that they recommend you need to look out for in other products.
What are they called?
Sequential Skin, founded by another British guy actually he lives in New York now, but they were initially incorporated in Singapore. But it was only then when I learned a lot about the ingredients and what's good for skin and what's not, and started to actually pay more attention and actually learn how to read the ingredients on the back of skincare products, and that kind of extends to other toiletries, right? And that's when I found out about like how sunscreen is like the worst, and how there's like literally cancer-inducing properties in pretty much all of the sunscreen lotions, even the ones that claim to be clean and vegan and all of this cruelty-free, etc. So I guess also now working in marketing, understanding that like, marketing, the role of marketing is really to sell a product or a service, and you have to take responsibility in trying to understand and do your own research on whether this product is actually good for you. Yeah. And if it's something like sunscreen, which you're using every day, and that's seeping into your skin, into your blood cells, is that actually something you want to be using on a daily basis? Because, it does go a long way, right? So, yeah, I guess it goes back to taking agency, like doing research and not just taking recommendations from friends, and really understanding like where this product comes from, like what is it actually good for, like what are the ingredients, and breaking it down.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think taking agency with your health, and to summarize, probably comes in a few forms. The first thing is actually prioritizing your health, and that doesn't have to mean become a bodybuilder or go or do what you enjoy, movement, like and looking at your health initially is something that I'd say, and then looking at what you like put into your body. Starting with food, and then actually understanding like the impact of some of the things that we ingest and the conditions around us. And I'm probably just getting to that position now. So like I'm good with like the health, the fitness, and like I know what I need to do to eat well. I'm now starting to sort of like do a bit more research into like the conditions around us, like how toxic our environments might be. Especially a city like London, it's like we're told that even like the air is just ridiculous.
Yeah, a lot of
you realise when you leave London and go to the north of England, even like you're just like,
wow, deep breaths.
And even the water tastes better. Like you get like loads of my friends that are like from northern cities and towns, and they come down, they're just like, this water tastes terrible, like it's awful, and you can actually tell the difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
But being aware of these things, I think, is a good way to take agency. So another big feature of like taking agency back into your life, and I think is ubiquitous, and something that is a feature of all of our lives, is money and our relationship with our finances. I would always put health first, because I think that's probably like, if you have all the money in the world and you can't buy back your health,
exactly.
I think it's really important to consider it in that way. But money and finances are probably one of the biggest ways that people feel like not in control of their lives, particularly if you're in debt in any way, because you feel like your debt is controlling you. But even if you're not in debt, your relationship with your money can have a real negative impact on your life, and feel like you don't really have it quite put together. Certainly something I've experienced in the past as well. And another manifest way of like taking proper agency of your life for me was when I improved my finances, but actually more importantly improved my relationship with my money and money in general. Is that something that you have experienced yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I think is, if not, I'd say I agree. I think health, it probably takes a higher ranking, but finances, without finances, what can you do, So of course it's a huge aspect, and if money is an emotional thing, and I think for a lot of people, how they approach money is very emotional. How they spend money, how they invest money can be very emotional. But yeah, for me, again, despite being an accountant, my personal finances were a mess back then.
It's so funny that so many people say that.
It's weird.
Your job is to manage money.
Exactly, but I just didn't even care. And I think a lot of it is, it was taken, back then when I was an accountant, I was in a very corporate environment. What was taking agency of my life, I was very much living a very A to B life. It was, blinkers off kind of thing. It was very I definitely didn't have that mindset of like questioning everything and trying to do things the better way. I was just kind of doing like, what do you do? Like, how do you do this? And I don't know. And but I guess like, yeah, just reiterating the fact that the internet has allowed so many more, like since over the past 10 years, there's so many new thought leaders who have kind
100%.
of popped out, like even through podcasts as a means of learning. There's so many like personal finance podcasts, like yours. And this stuff is really helpful. Like what you guys are doing with Millennial Money is like amazing. And I think it's actually really, like the case studies you do on individuals, how much they earn, how they save. It is still a very kind of taboo topic and not a lot of people talk about it. And so, you guys kind of shedding light on this aspect is really important. And so, probably it was only in the last 2 to 3 years when I really started to take control of my finances, kind of. I think when I started my own business, that's when I had no choice to, because like I did my own profit and loss. I had to, for once I had to like forecast my own income, and I had to really, it forced me to kind of look at my own financials in a way, and I have to keep track of all my expenditure, and then, tax deductible expenses, like naturally I had to do it. And so then I was like, okay, I may as well look at my personal spending as well, and be a bit more diligent on my budgeting, my forecasting and budgeting.
Did you do your own accounts, by the way? I say that because you are an accountant.
I did, yes, yeah.
So see, that's really useful because we...
They're really simple. There's not much going on.
No, I know you say that, but for people that aren't accountants, like, so the first year or the first few months that we operated, first financial year, me and Shaq obviously didn't get an accountant, but I would just do it ourselves. Oh, we made a mess of that, boy. And then when we got an accountant, we were like, oh my God, like didn't know about tax efficiency. Well, I say efficiency, but like didn't know like any of this. Like we just thought, okay, we make money, you pay tax, like fine, and that's how it works. It's such a steep learning curve, but you do just learn so much off the back of like managing it. We definitely don't do our accounts on our like. Honestly, we give it to an accountant to do.
It's better to outsource. It's like not worth doing it. It's just easy for me and it's simple. My accounts aren't, I don't have a ton of huge assets, or it's like a real, and it's not complex, but I always recommend outsourcing things that you can't do, or
100%.
It would save you more time to do that than learning to do it.
And do you, and I say this, so I do, and I'm very open to it, did you ever have experience with debt? Is that at any stage?
Not, apart from student loan debt, I guess.
Okay.
That counts for sure, but other than that.
Yeah, because I think that's another big feature. A lot of people and friends of ours as well who've been very open about it. And Shaq and I actually do have experience with debt, which is ridiculous because we were like, again, going back to like following the route of success, earning more money than we thought we'd need at one point, and just getting into more and more debt just because we had no idea how to manage money. And really following the examples of like maybe parents or like mentors who had very different opportunities to us. And chasing those, or like chasing ambitions based on those opportunities.
But where was the debt coming from, if you don't mind me asking?
Like, socializing, being in London, mainly, lifestyle. No, not just that.
London is really expensive.
Yeah, it was just like, I think just living beyond our means. Right. Constantly, and not realizing that we're living beyond our means. Because like, you have a salary that comes in at the end of the month, which is enough to get
so
by
like credit card debt is what you're saying,
Partly, but I'd say primarily. And you're just every month you're spending slightly more and more than you realize that you have, and it mounts and it mounts and it becomes an increasingly bigger problem. Getting in control for me when I first started to be like, okay, wow, I need to sort this out. Getting in control of that was like a real good necessary first step. And then thinking about, and then I realized I was budgeting without actually knowing I was budgeting because I was like, okay, how much money do I have? And how much money do I need, and what do I need to do with this money? So, and that concept broadly is budgeting. If you had said that to me at the time, I'd be like, no, budgeting, that's not for me. But that concept is budgeting. So that's how I first started to take control. And then when I felt more and more in control, when I'd made like longer term plans than just month to month, it really did feel like taking agency again, did feel like taking control of everything again. And that builds, and then you start to think about longer term or medium and longer term things and start to consider savings and investments as well. So it is a journey. And I think, again, similar to what we said about health, you have to learn about money. You don't have to become a qualified expert in like giving financial advice, but you need to understand money, tax, how it all works, because it impacts you. How to like, and the longer that we don't understand it, like you're putting yourself at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
So I think everyone goes on a similar journey to one that we did. And it surprises people because when people talk to people who they perceive to know money, their journeys might only be nascent or a few years in.
Yeah, exactly.
But you do learn quite a lot quite quickly.
Yeah.
And there are so many resources available at the moment where you can pick a lot of that up.
Yeah, I agree. And I think sometimes it's just over complicated, and a lot of the time it's like working out, right? You don't have to, you go walk into a gym and you see all these fancy equipment. There are other ways of getting fit. You know, you don't have to always be using this fancy equipment. Same with finance. Like a lot of it is just like putting a bit away every month and putting that into, you know, I'd say not an ISA, like investment accounts, and just putting that away, not really thinking about it. But for me, like at the end of every month, I do I call it my income and expenditure. So I review my expenses, my income, and try and do a bit of forecasting and see how much I want to invest each month. And just that alone gives me comfort in knowing my exact financial position. And like every 3 months or every 6 months, I will do a full audit of like my assets and understand like what is my financial position in terms of my assets. And I think just knowing gives me more control that, you know, then do I have the power to spend a bit more or you know, to actually start saving a bit more or to reach my certain goals. So a lot of it is just like, a lot of people just think finances, I do not want to deal with it. They just don't even bother to look. And that's where they're going wrong. I'm not even saying they have to learn about what are all the tax breaks. They need to understand everything about, you know, tax laws. Not that is not it. It's like just spending the time each month to understand what are you spending, where's your money going, you know, and just doing a bit of an analysis really. Because in this case, knowledge is power.
100%. I think you like literally just, I'll summarize it perfectly in that most people like have their head in the sand.
Yes, exactly.
I definitely did when I wasn't in control of my money.
So did I.
It was like, oh, I make this much money and this is how much my bills are. So as long as I don't go beneath this point. And that's most of the people are like that, by the way. I was definitely like that. But knowing, even if you're not immediately sorting everything out, but just understanding your current state of affairs is bringing the control back again and thinking, okay, this is where I am. This is my starting point. This is where I need to go. This is what I need to do. And it isn't pretending that that's not the case, which most people do, by the way. In the UK especially, I know in the States as well, there's some stats of like majority of middle income earners, which is most people, spend more than they earn. They don't realize that they're doing it, utilizing things like credit. Because they're like, oh, I'm going to get paid. I'll just pay it all off at the end of the month. But obviously anything can happen at any point.
It's just quite an intuitive, like emotional thing, right? Often when we contemplate whether we want to make this purchase, it's not like, how much do I have left in my bank? It's always like, oh, how would I feel when I wear this? You know, do I really need this kind of thing? It's just about being more, just understanding. Because everyone has different financial positions and different goals and different starting points. So that's why it's hard. I think it's good to create more transparency amongst what everyone's earning, what your friends are earning, so you can benchmark in a way. But honestly, you know, it depends on industry, like stage of life, career transition. Like it's really difficult. Everyone's on a different path. So you kind of have to take ownership of your own.
100%. And everyone has different impulses. So I've always been open about my natural state is to be terrible with money. And which is so funny because...
And if you keep telling yourself that, then you do end up being
and I was like, okay, and I just accepted it. But then I was like, no, this isn't a fiction that I need to live by. Even though my natural state is probably not to be a sensible spender, I've learned to like act against those impulses. It's so funny actually because my dad was saying the other day about like comparing me and my siblings. And the first thing that he said, he was like, oh, I think they'll be more sensible with their money than you. I was like, do you know what I do for a living?
What did your brother and sister do?
So my brother's literally just started his career. They're much younger. Yeah, my sister's a med student. She's the brains. And my brother's just started his career actually in finance.
Right.
But yeah, in my head I was like, that's funny because I teach people about money. But I try to lose the chip on my shoulder.
That's so funny.
But obviously they know better. But yeah, I would say finances definitely are like an important manifest way of regaining agency, whatever that might look like for you and anyone, as a rounding point. And then as like a more like forward-looking, future-looking way of like gaining agency or custody of your own life, is a world that I know much less about than you know, is the world of crypto. And obviously your career, if we were to go back to it, is going from working in marketing, or we started off in finance in Singapore, and then you made a move a couple of years ago into the crypto space, where you are now as a CMO within a crypto payments platform. But how do you think crypto will facilitate like the next stage of people taking ownership or custody or agency of their
it's a really
life?
Interesting topic. I think as I mentioned before, the internet has like totally democratized how, the value and exchange of information. And I think crypto and the blockchain as a technology has and already had the power to basically democratize the value and exchange of money, right? And seeing how, there's so many different DeFi products out there where people are basically learning ridiculous, well, maybe not now, because it's basically it's called the crypto winter, so the markets, as you know, aren't doing very well.
Yeah, I'm not even looking
still,
at my...
I think crypto is still very coupled with the traditional stocks and shares. But, in the past few years, people had the ability to basically stake their crypto, which is kind of like putting their money in an ISA, like saving and earning interest, and earning a much higher interest than they would, say, putting it in an ISA. And I think with everything happening on a global perspective right now, with cost of living going up, we can no longer, I think it's safe to say that we can no longer trust the government to have our best interests at heart, especially when it comes to finances. And it is very shocking to see the world that we're living in right now. And people need to take more agency, and they need to take more control in their finances. And I think crypto is an amazing tool and platform for people to take custody of their own finances. I think with a lot of basically how it works, a lot of the money is basically, it can be put on a decentralized platform like the blockchain. Right now, people can basically put their crypto in their own wallet and they hold the key through like a password to their own crypto. And now the downside is that a lot of people don't like to take ownership of their own money. They want to just leave it in the bank. They want someone to take care of it for me. Like, eyes blind shut, I don't want to deal with it. And so I do think that, this whole idea and fantasy of kind of moving towards a world where everyone has own custody of their own money and everyone's like, be your own bank. I think that's quite naive and very idealistic. But it has started to kind of craft that narrative whereby people are taking more ownership, and there has been a lot of ways to start earning money. It's still crypto, and Web3 is a very nascent space. And so there's definitely a lot of scams going on right now. And so again, it's even more a case of really do your own research, and it can be very overwhelming, but it is right now like high risk, high reward, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's my take on it as well. And if you were to look at your portfolio as a whole, I always say, like, for me, this is what I do. I have I understand my own appetite for risk, which is probably higher than most people's. And I allocate a portion of that to crypto. And obviously I fundamentally more and more so believe in the crypto promise and the crypto journey, in sort of like cutting out the middleman and taking custody of money yourself. But I think the upside reward is almost uncapped if you're making investments into crypto. And the downside, obviously, is that you could lose the money that you have, which you probably won't, but you could. So the upside potential is high, which is why I always allocate a bit. Not all of my money, and I think that's a mistake that people make, especially if they're like beginners to invest in.
And never take
because then they're like, it's be all and
leverage,
end all, exactly, all your money into crypto, which I wouldn't advise. But I certainly believe in it still as a concept. And actually the technology behind it is what I find like fascinating, like within the blockchain. Again, I don't want to get too technical, and I can't get too technical because I don't have a technical understanding of it. But what I do love is the many inefficiencies that exist, whether that's like banks owning or holding your money, or whether it's like when you're buying goods across borders and it has to go through so many checkpoints, and actually completely cutting out all of that friction. Using,
totally.
like by leveraging blockchain is like an amazing thing to be able to do. But like if you were to like make a prediction or like a bet on crypto, how over the next like 5 years, how much of a change do you think it will bring?
I mean, the crypto, I actually, like Web3 ecosystem is so broad, and there's so many different projects building. You've got wallets, you've got exchanges. There's obviously a ton of NFT projects out there and NFT marketplaces. You've got payment platforms, which is the company that I work at, who are trying to really facilitate this movement. And so we kind of see ourselves as a Web 2.5 in a way, because we're like the bridge between the world that we live in today and the future of crypto and Web3. But I do think, regulation is obviously a huge barrier. But I think slowly and surely we've come a long way, and each year just keeps growing. And even though I think it's important to kind of not see what's happening in the markets in terms of, the price of crypto, and how crypto and Web3 as a technology is going to permeate through our lives, our everyday lives, right? Obviously, there's a huge linkage, but I think it's important to understand that slowly, like nowadays, we basically enabled a lot of merchants to be able to accept crypto as a form of payment that, wasn't even thought of like 4 or 5 years ago. And so now you can kind of go into a store and pay with crypto. People won't do that now because they still want to keep their money as a form of investment, but you can do that. And it is much easier. In fact, it's just as easy to pay with fiat currency. And so as long as there's like a better way to do something, and it's not like doing it for the sake of because it's on the blockchain or because it's crypto, but is there a way in which we can improve our lives and using the blockchain or crypto as a means of doing that, then of course it's naturally going to make change in society. And so I think I'm putting bets that the next bull run will be like the end of 2023, so we've still got a while. And the next bull run, there'll be more investment, more VCs fundraising, more other projects happening. And right now, the general consensus in the Web3 space is people are just really busy building, and people are just kind of getting their heads down to get ready for the next bull run. So I think there'll be a lot of new things happening. The challenge is really trying not to make it so technical and using all these buzzwords. So that the mainstream can slowly be adopted. It's the same with social media. Like, you remember when Instagram came about and people kind of thought social media managers were like, what is this? Do you remember the time? I can't even remember when it was, but when social media manager became like a role in itself. And we're kind of going through that same shift right now. There's like a dedicated Web3 person within companies, and it is still very nascent, but even touching on the topic of NFTs, like a lot of it is just fun and games right now, speculative investments, but there is a lot of potential for, a non-fungible token to be able to have a lot of applications in the world, whether that's real estate or ticketing or supply chain management. Like, imagine going to a restaurant and being able to scan a QR code to see like where the meat actually came from. Is it actually sustainable? And all of that information being recorded on the blockchain and not tampered with. It has a lot of potential applications, but we still have a long way to go, I think. And there is a lot of education in the space, but slowly with time, I think that change always happens. But slowly. It's never kind of immediate change, is it? Yeah,
I think it's exciting. I think there's fundamentally a misunderstanding of the crypto space in general. But I think those are, across those themes, are like really good examples of ways to take agency in your life and how you might be able to like set yourself up for the future as well. It's been really interesting to explore those themes with you. One thing that we do like to do to close, which you might have heard before in a very playful way, is just to ask all of our guests, like, is there any loose change that you'd like to share with our audience? It could be anything that you're reading, it could be a dumb joke, it could be just anything that you've come across recently that you'd like to share with our audience?
In crypto, I guess. Not loose change, but you call it like dust.
Is that a term? Is that a crypto term?
Yeah.
Is that a crypto term?
Any dust?
Might
Any dust?
Might have to change this to, you got any dust for us?
Any dust, I'd say take bold risks. Always look out for yourself. And take agency of your life.
I love that. I love that. I'm going to take those points forward. But thank you so much. It's been
Thanks so much
such
for
a
having
pleasure
me.
to have you.
It's a great conversation.
Yeah, we're looking forward to everyone hearing this one.
Cut.
Cut.
Nice.
Thank
you. Sorry, I'll